Trump says the Iran war ends in 2 to 3 weeks. Iran says there is no ceasefire. Trump says Iran has a new president. Iran does not have a new president. The UAE is preparing to go to war to open the Strait of Hormuz. And somewhere in all of this, Trump told a Reuters reporter today that he doesn't actually care about Iran's nuclear stockpile anymore. The thing he said this whole war was all about. We're going to get into all of that. Plus, MAGA is eating itself. Megyn Kelly wants to know who talked to Trump and talked him into all this. And Democrats are having a very public fight right now about who counts as acceptable company. I'm Ravi Gupta. This is Majority 54. I'm flying solo today. And we got a lot to talk about. Let's start with Iran. Last night, Trump addressed the nation, sort of, and basically laid down a timetable to wind this war down.
Lunatics along the strait, but if they want something, but I would say that within 2 weeks, maybe 3, we're hitting them very hard. Last night we knocked out tremendous amounts of missile-making facilities. We, as you probably read or wrote, we knocked out. Excuse me?
Pardon me for interrupting. The U.S. will be gone or done with the war in
I think we're 2 or 3 weeks.
Not 3 weeks. If it is,
we'll leave because there's no reason for us to do this. Look, problem with the strait. A guy can take a mine, drop it in the water, and say, "Oh, it's unsafe." It's not like you're taking out an army or you're taking out a country, or they can drop it, or you can take a machine gun from the shore and shoot a few bullets at a ship, or maybe an over-the-shoulder missile, small missiles. That's not for us. That'll be for France. That'll be for whoever's using the strait. But I think when we leave, probably that's all cleared up. Today, I heard tremendous numbers of ships were sailing through. We're negotiating with them right now. They've been, again, we have had regime change. Now, regime change was not one of the things I had as a goal. I had one goal. They will have no nuclear weapon. And that goal has been attained. They will not have nuclear weapons. But we're finishing the job. And I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job. But we want to knock out every single thing they have. Now, it's possible that we'll make a deal before that because we'll hit bridges.
So, he says that they will not have nuclear weapons, but today, and that was yesterday, today, as I said, he talked to the Reuters reporters and said about Iran's uranium. He says that's so far underground, I don't care about that. Basically saying he's not going to do anything about it. He also has kind of oversold regime change at various points. He did it in that clip. Here's another example of how he's talking about this.
It's a new regime. They are much more accessible. They are right. They said, we have a present for you, Mr. President, out of respect. And they said, wait a minute, you wanted me to answer the question. You're a fresh person. We've had a lot of problems with you, haven't we? No, they don't. You asked me a question. No, they don't have to make a deal with me. When we feel that they are, for a long period of time, put into the Stone Ages, and they won't be able to come up with a nuclear weapon, then we'll leave. Whether we have a deal or not, it's irrelevant. Now, it's possible.
So he's saying that we have regime change already. Like a reminder, we have the son of the former supreme leader in charge. That's the quote unquote regime change we had. And mind you, the old supreme leader, Khamenei, was like 86 years old. So, nature would have taken its course and quote unquote regime changed on its own. But now we have the son who, by all accounts, is as or more radical. The son whose now father has been killed, his wife has been killed, at least one of his children has been killed, a lot of his colleagues have been killed. That's the regime change we have right now. And Iran seems emboldened. Trump seems to be trying to create arbitrary deadlines to get out of this. I think David Axelrod summed this up well, where he said, "Pass the hot sauce. We've reached the predicted taco moment." On his presser right now, he basically says, "Adios, Iran, mission accomplished." Now, Iran seems pretty bold here. They said that they're focused on defending their territory, and their spokesperson said, quote, "The U.S. isn't serious about diplomacy." And so they see the U.S., and understandably, as inconsistent and unserious here at various points. Trump is saying, we have to, we have to bomb them into submission. We have to take the strait. Then he says he doesn't care about the strait. It's for other people to worry about. And then he says we don't care about the enriched uranium. It is inconsistent, but I think largely the political calculus here is for Trump, the only thing he seems to care about is his very narrow base. He's been, and we'll talk more about this, he's been losing a lot of that base. So I think he wants to stop the bleeding there. And I think he can count on the fact that there's some subset of MAGA who, no matter what Trump says, as long as he calls it a victory, they'll believe it's a victory. And he's probably right about that small segment, but not without damage to our country and to his wider political coalition. Meanwhile, Iran is widening its targets here. So we talk about oil, but Iran has actually been targeting things like the tourism of the Gulf states around them, things like aluminum and steel production. And so this is a bigger deal than just the oil markets. And as I've talked about in previous podcasts, oil is upstream of a lot of other things that we care about. Almost everything in the economy depends upon petroleum and energy to function. So no matter what happens, even if Trump's able to wind this thing down in 2 weeks, which I think is a tall order and would come at significant cost to the U.S. credibility and power and all of our allies, and emboldens Iran, where basically at this point, any deal with Iran seems to, will likely lead to Iran and the regime there consolidating, showing that they stood up to the United States and quote unquote won according to their aims. They'll have greater control over the Strait of Hormuz. And they'll also know that Trump will have very little appetite in re-engaging in a war. So they'll come out stronger than they were before. Trump actually took to Truth Social yesterday and basically castigated our allies. He said all of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have this suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the U.S. We have plenty. Number two, build up some delayed courage, go to the Strait and take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Get your own oil, President DJT. Now, reminder, the UK did join us in the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, and then Trump repaid that by bullying them and other European allies with tariffs before any of this happened. So this idea that he's somehow punishing them because they wouldn't join him in a war that he didn't tell them about beforehand is obviously silly. Sagar Enjeti, who was a Trump supporter, now seems to be regretting his vote. The host of Breaking Points tweeted this in response to Trump's message. He said, "This, ironically, then, is the beginning of the end of the U.S. empire, militarily unable to collapse the Iranian regime from the air, sparking a global energy crisis for critical U.S. allies, and then telling them to go and fix the crisis we created." The Wall Street Journal is reporting that despite the fact that the U.S. is trying to wind this war down, actually the United Arab Emirates, UAE, is preparing to help the U.S. Open the strait by force. They're basically joining the war. So are we winding this thing down or are we escalating it? It's not clear. As all of this is happening, we have a very unserious Secretary of Defense, or as he likes to call it, Secretary of War. Pete Hegseth, I think, at least caught my attention with this press conference he gave a couple of days ago, in which he relayed a conversation that may or may not have happened with a troop that he'd met along the way.
I did the same with his boss, a colonel with a heart the size of Texas and a beautiful deployment mustache to match. I witnessed lethality. I met a junior airman as the sun was going down and a chill was setting on the tarmac, who, when asked what they needed, she simply looked up at me with a sly smile on her face and said, "More bombs, sir, and bigger bombs. We will happily oblige her."
So this guy who has one of the most powerful positions in government and perhaps the world continues to feel like he needs to demonstrate his masculinity and power in the most cringeworthy, unnecessary ways. And it's like, I just don't even know what to say. What is being accomplished with this message? Like, why do you have to constantly try to prove to us that you're all powerful, whatever? We get it. You're the Secretary of War. I've heard Tim Miller, John Lovett, others talk about this and how just desperate Hegseth seems to be to constantly try to prove to us who he is. This is just a person who I do not trust. And much like Kash Patel, it just makes me deeply uncomfortable that these are the people who are in charge of our national security and our domestic security in this country. And they report to a guy in Trump who is not very serious himself. Like I've been watching tons of clips of how Trump has been publicly carrying himself during this war, where you'd expect if there ever was going to be a time for sobriety, it would be now. And he is as unserious as he's ever been. This is during a cabinet meeting with Cabinet Secretary Burgum, who asks about gas prices. This is what Trump had to say.
That flows to American refineries on the Gulf Coast, lowering the price of gas in America. So it's a...
Forget that. When are they going to do the statue? The hell with you.
Yeah, who cares about gas prices? The number one concern on the minds of the American people and the world, probably. When are they going to build that statue, right? He went on Fox News, and Dana Perino is asking him about, I think it's starvation in Iran or whatever, and this was Trump's response.
Do you have any insight as to how they are doing? Do they have drinking water? Do they have food?
Right, I do.
It's upsetting.
I do. But first, you remember when we had lunch years ago in the base of Trump Tower when it was a brand new building?
It's a long time ago, yes.
A long time ago, and you haven't changed.
Oh.
You have not changed. Now, I'm not allowed to say this. It's the end of my political career, but you may be even better looking, okay? So I don't know what you're doing. But I will not say that.
Has a lot
I will
to do
not
with
say
that.
that because that will...
Deeply serious person we have in the White House. Meanwhile, he's getting played by Russia, probably the biggest beneficiary of this war. This is Christian Amanpour describing the situation as it relates to Cuba at the moment.
About Russia, all of this time has been spent trying to make sure that Putin does not win in Ukraine. So two things. Putin clearly, come on, how do you explain his sending a tanker full of oil, 730, whatever, however much it is, barrels, liters, whatever it is, oil to Cuba, defying a blockade that the United States has constructed around Cuba, a naval blockade, telling the Coast Guard not to intercept now this this Russian ship full of oil for Cuba so that they don't just collapse because their grid is in real jeopardy. The hospitals can't operate properly. People are dying. It's really, really terrible what's happening on a humanitarian basis. So, I mean, Putin, he was clearly testing the US, right? In their own backyard. I mean, literally, that is one of the history's most incredible sort of lessons. The whole embargo in 1962 and who's going to bust it and who's going to take missiles there, the Russians and this and that, nuclear weapons and the whole lot. And now Trump allows them to go through. What is going on?
I have to admit this one surprised.
So to recap, we fought this war, never really explained to us, but it was sold as about trying to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Trump has said today that he's not going to go after their uranium stockpiles. It was then explained that it was supposed to be regime change. We have the son of the supreme leader in charge. Trump is trying to sell that new leader as regime change. Then it was about reopening the Strait of Hormuz as he was trying to do damage control and create a very limited win here. It seems like, depending on which minute you catch Trump, he's saying that it's actually up to our allies to reopen it. The U.S. doesn't care, doesn't use that. So you're left with, well, what rationale is left? Well, Iran actually effectively has their sanctions lifted, something that you would never have predicted before this. They're able to trade their oil. They have greater control over the Strait of Hormuz, have more leverage over their neighbors in the Middle East and their adversaries. Russia also had their sanctions removed, is able to trade oil in ways that they weren't before. The shadow fleet is gone, right? So, and they're also defying a U.S. blockade in Cuba, and the U.S. is doing nothing. So the U.S. looks weaker, our adversaries look stronger. That's where we are today. Never mind the loss of U.S. life, the tremendous cost in terms of weapons that we've used or that have been destroyed, and the already frayed relationships we had with our allies that are as poor as they've ever been. Like even Meloni, who is billed as a right-wing populist in Italy, probably more complicated than that description. Meloni has told the U.S. that the U.S. cannot use Italy to stage flights related to this conflict. So even the quote-unquote right-wing populist in Meloni is telling the U.S. to go F themselves. This is where we are today. And obviously, Cuba is lingering. What's going to happen there? There are two schools of thought. Is the U.S. just going to cut their losses and say no more regime change, right? That's one possibility. The other is that Trump is feeling emasculated and embarrassed, and so he needs another quick win, one with maybe, to his mind, fewer potential downsides, although I'm not sure that's true. Here's Rubio talking about the future of Cuba.
Case of Cuba is actually tragic. Cuba has an economic model that wouldn't work anywhere in the world. They don't have an economic model. They don't have an economy in Cuba. There literally is no economy. And sadly, the people in charge of the apparatus of government there are both incompetent and unable to solve these problems. So I think Cuba is in need of two things, economic reforms and political reform. You cannot fix their economy if you don't change their system of government. And but they're in a lot of trouble. There's no doubt about it. And, we'll have more news on that fairly soon. We're working on that as well.
I don't know what that means. It's kind of vague, but obviously this administration is capable of anything, and potentially fighting a two-front war is in the cards, especially if they feel embarrassed and need to show that they can, take out another leader. This one a lot closer to home. We're going to take a break, but before we do, I over at the branch, my day job, did a podcast called "Where the Schools Went," and it's all about the 20-year transformation of the school system post Katrina in New Orleans. And we have now been named a finalist for two different Webby Awards: Best Limited Series Documentary Podcast and Best Health, Science, and Education Podcast. And you could vote for the People's Choice Awards for both of those. It'll take you no time. It takes like a second per each. You don't have to vote for anything else. You could use your Gmail account to get in and out. You do me a huge favor if you vote. We actually produced that podcast in partnership with the Midas Network. So you'd also be helping the Midas Network win another Webby Award. I sat with those guys at the Webby Awards last year. So it's in the description, both in YouTube and in the podcast. I'll also drop it right now into the comments as we head to a quick break. But when we come out of the break, versus Kelly, Alex Jones, Dave Smith, Rogan, Tucker Carlson, and then we'll talk about them infighting over Hassan Piker, and then some polling that's very inconvenient for Trump, all when we come back.
Starting something new isn't just hard, it's terrifying. So much work goes into this thing that you're not entirely sure will work out, and it can be hard to make that leap of faith. Trust me, I know. When I started this podcast, I wasn't even sure what I was doing. What if nobody listens? What if I make a fool of myself? What if nobody buys these products? Now I know that I was right in believing in myself and launching the podcast despite all the fears and the hesitations. It also helps when you have a partner like Shopify on your side. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Heinz and Mattel to brands that are just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's style. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. Best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. And what if I get stuck? Shopify is always around to share advice with their award-winning 24/7 customer support. It's time to turn those what ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/majority. Go to shopify.com/majority. That's shopify.com/majority. HIMS.com/majority. ED is more common than you think and simpler to treat than ever. Through HIMS, you can connect online with a licensed provider to access personalized treatment options discreetly and on your own terms. Through HIMS, you can access personalized prescription treatment options for ED if prescribed. HIMS offers access to ED treatment options ranging from personalized products to trusted generics that cost 95% less than brand names if prescribed. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself. HIMS brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatments that put your goals first. This isn't one-size-fits-all care that forgets you in the waiting room. It's your health and goals put first with real medical providers making sure you get what you need to get results. Think of HIMS as your digital front door that gets you back to your old self with simple 100% online access to trusted treatments for ED and more, all in one place. To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit HIMS.com/majority. That's HIMS.com/majority for your free online visit. HIMS.com/majority. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. Actual price will depend on product and subscription plan.
So there's never been more fighting within MAGA than we've seen in the past few weeks, and it seems to be getting worse and worse by the day. Let's start with Megyn Kelly, who I would say is kind of on the mild side of criticizing Trump.
As this thing goes south, we need to know exactly who talked him into it and what representations were made to convince the president that this was a good idea. Who specifically? The names we know are Bibi Netanyahu first and foremost, Lindsey Graham equally to blame. We know from the Wall Street Journal report that Mark Thiessen of Fox News and General Jack Keane were major advocates of the war. Okay, like those guys, but they appear to have been very wrong that this was a good idea. And we could keep going. Mark Levin, chief among them. He says now, oh, it wasn't me. Every night on Fox News out there urging the president to do this. And then he had a meeting with him in June where we know he denies it now. We know he pushed him for this. Ben Shapiro was out on his show every day pushing this war. Like there were very prominent activists on the right who were practically frothing at the mouth for this thing. And now that it's not only going poorly, but the president's poll numbers are in a precipitous free fall, we'd love to see some accountability. Who promised him what?
So this is the mild version of the criticism of the war. And I say this because this is the Trump's advisors are at fault argument, right? So she's still not quite in the let me overtly criticize Trump too often. Because I guess her calculus is that that's so popular with certain segments of her audience. Now, Shapiro, who's kind of in that realm, but opposite her on the sort of key issues, he still kind of doesn't like to criticize Trump himself and still wants to enamor himself with the MAGA base. Shapiro seems to have been having a precipitous decline in his audience, has been going back and forth with Kelly pretty consistently. This is just one heated example.
This would be her continued complete moral betrayal of Erica Kirk to kiss Candace Owens' ass, even as she cosplays as the brave woman standing up against censors who don't exist. She says she'll die before she bends the knee to those who criticize Candace Owens, which is why, for example, sadly, Megyn Kelly continues to pretend she's the vanguard of the conservative movement, citing, you wait for it, her YouTube numbers. Yesterday, because she's upset at me, she put out a statement saying that she wanted to thank her audience because they had 138 million views on YouTube in February alone, twice every show on CBS News combined. And then she talks about my YouTube traffic and says that her YouTube traffic is significantly higher than my YouTube traffic. Again, I'm not going to get into a contest of comparing statistics on episode downloads or YouTube downloads for specific episodes with Megyn Kelly, because that's not how I measure morality. But that is clearly how Megyn measures morality. Now, some might point out that Megyn's supposed bravery, because Megyn tends to put herself out there as a brave figure standing up to the predations of the censors. Some might point out that Megyn's bravery stops precisely where the clicks end. That she was pro-trans until the cliques turned against it, at which point she suddenly became the most militant, cursing opponent of the trans movement. That she was pro-Israel until the cliques turned against it, at which point she started hinting of dark, sinister conspiracies to silence her. That she was pro-Erica Kirk until the cliques turned against it, at which point she went totally silent on Candace Owens, slandering the widow of her supposed friend. There is not and has not been a political parade that begins without Megyn Kelly at the front, that ends without Megyn at the front waving a baton. And as for her purported bravery against censorship, let's be clear. According to Megyn herself, she's thriving. She's got great traffic. No one's censoring her. And she's talking about every topic under the sun, particularly things like Israel. Well, I shouldn't say every topic, almost every topic. It turns out there is one topic she won't talk about. That, of course, would be her continued complete moral betrayal of Erica Kirk to kiss Candace Owens' ass, even as she cosplays as the brave woman standing up against censors who don't exist. She says she'll die before she bends the knee to those who criticize Candace Owens. That's a bold stand, Cotton.
So things are getting heated, obviously, but it doesn't stop there. There's a lot of attention to Trump himself in some other aspects of this sort of MAGA coalition, right? So whereas Ben Shapiro and Megyn Kelly don't like to criticize Trump himself by name, in part because of seems like audience capture, of all people, Alex Jones went in on Trump this week.
Ankles swell up 3 times the size they were before. That means heart failure. And he does look sick. And he does babble and, sound like the brain's not doing too hot. And so we just cut bait on Trump and we just mobilize against the Democrats.
All right, so that's Alex Jones. And then there's like sort of the milder parts of the sort of MAGA coalition. Rogan made headlines this week. We'll get to where that came from, but he had a little bit more subtle and important discussion with Dave Smith on his show about masked ICE agents.
But also, the supreme law of the land is the Constitution of the United States of America. And I've seen a ton of videos where there were masked ICE agents, not even identifying themselves, going up to people, telling them that you have to answer my questions. You don't have an option to walk away, which is like not true at all.
Well, that was my take on it, is that you can't accept people that are masked, that don't have any paperwork, that don't have a warrant on the streets in militarized situations.
Right, but the bigger headline came from when Rogan called out the MAGA coalition itself. Let's take a look at this.
The phrase "Make America Great Again." I don't care. Then
but
fine.
If that phrase sucks. Here's the thing. Like, first of all, America is great. Make America greater, I'm down. But make America great again, and then it becomes a movement of a bunch of fucking dorks, because a lot of them are dorks. A lot of them, these really weird fucking uninteresting, unintelligent people that have got something they cling to. And there's a lot of people that are just real, genuine patriots. And they're all lumped into this one group, and you got to accept the dorks too. Fuck that.
Yeah.
Oops, got booted off there for a second, and so I'm back here. So Rogan calls Trump supporters losers. You'd expect maybe Trump to come to their defense, which JD Vance did. But Trump actually took a different tack. Let's hear what Trump had to say.
Missing right now? What is missing in leadership?
Well, it's winning. You got to win. I've watched a lot of people, leaders, great leaders. And, the one thing about sports is you break it down into, a 2-hour period, something nice. You don't have to wait a lifetime to find out is somebody a winner or a loser. You got a lot of losers, mostly losers, fortunately. It's a good thing to have a lot of losers. I always like to hang around with losers, actually, because it makes me feel better. I hate guys that are very, very successful and you have to listen to their success stories. I like people that like to listen to my success.
Nobody's more disrespectful to his supporters than Trump himself. Like, somehow it was a huge scandal when Hillary Clinton called certain Trump supporters deplorables, right? Somehow that was irredeemable. Yet Trump himself says that he only hangs out with losers. This is where we are today. One more person who has been calling out Trump, believe it or not, Tucker Carlson, who I know it sounds like a million years ago, but during, right after Trump's horrible comments about Robert Mueller, Tucker Carlson waded into the president's comments.
President saying he's glad Mueller's dead. Good. Right. And I thought, as someone who, vocally opposed the Mueller investigation like every night that it was ongoing, every single night. So I'm obviously not for the Mueller investigation.
Yeah.
But I was more opposed to it than anyone else. But when a man dies, even if it's someone you disagree with or even hate, like there's a certain reverence in death that's required if you're going to have reverence for life.
Absolutely.
There's something awful about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you judge society by how it remembers its dead, like straight up. And people can have any problem they want with Robert Mueller, but at the same time, he has a grieving family. He has a wife. He has kids. This is a man who served the country honorably for decades, starting in Vietnam as a Marine. He was wounded in combat. His first child was born while he was deployed. He flew to Hawaii and got to see her for a brief minute before he flew back and went back to war. And then after all of that, he decided to stay in service to his country for another few decades. And that is incredibly honorable. You can I disagree with the Mueller investigation. I remember watching you every night talk about it.
All right. So we're getting a little bit more, we can call it moral clarity. I don't want to give too much credit from certain aspects of the right. While there are some, whether it's Ben Shapiro, Megyn Kelly, Fox News, who continue to toe a certain line, and they're towing different lines. But there actually has been this week infighting on the left as well. And a lot of it has been centered around this gentleman named Hassan Piker. He's 34 years old, and he's amassed a huge online fan base, including 3 million followers on Twitch and 1.85 million on YouTube. He's definitely one of the most prominent left-leaning commentators in the United States. He streams, daily political commentary, and the proximate dispute erupted when Piker said that he would join Abdul Al-Sayed, who's a Democratic Senate candidate in Michigan, for 2 upcoming rallies. And this would be Piker's first major campaign appearances of the 2026 midterms. It seems like he was also planning to attend rallies with the Pennsylvania Representative Summer Lee. And this is a controversy because Piker has said, let's say, some controversial things very recently that have been ricocheting through the internet. He said in August 2019 that America deserved 9/11. He said America deserved 9/11, dude, fuck it, I'm saying it. After October 7th, he said a lot of things that he's had to clean up. In particular, here's one example. A listener called in and basically said, hey, maybe we should be condemning the massacre of a bunch of innocent people at a rave. And here's how that exchange played out.
Like, look at this guy. You know what shouldn't happen? Killing 260 people at a music festival. No, you're right, man. That just happened on its own because, bad guys wanted to do bad things. You're right. Dude, if they fucking subjugated you to a open air prison your whole fucking life, you're going to break out eventually when you realize that there's no other way to get out of it. Do you think that this happened out of nowhere? Do you think this happened out of thin air? Are you fucking stupid? Do you think the Israeli state was just peacefully coexisting and then these guys came in with fucking gliders out of nowhere? Don't say fuck off, dude. They didn't deserve it, you fucking idiot. My goal is solutions. Your goal is the continuation of violence. You want way more than 260 people dying. You want every single Palestinian to be fucking executed ruthlessly in the streets so that you can build another fucking theme park in Gaza. You fucking baying pig. You fucking bloodthirsty, violent pig dog. Suck my dick.
So, that was his reaction there. And again, like, you can believe anything. You can criticize the Israeli government. You could think that this war in Gaza is inhumane. You can criticize Netanyahu, as we've done many times on this podcast, and still believe, as I do, that the actions on October 7th were horrific. We're talking about raping innocent people. Everybody's raped who's innocent, but raping civilians, kidnapping, killing children, killing even like foreign, like Chinese immigrants who are there just working, right? And kidnapping some of them as well. Indiscriminate massacre and in some cases torture of people. This guy has a sort of pattern of not just downplaying that, but in some cases excusing it. He later said in a different video, he says, it doesn't matter if rapes fucking happened on October 7th. Like, that doesn't change the dynamic for me even this much. The Palestinian resistance is not perfect. And again, like, that language, the Palestinian resistance is not perfect, is just like a way of generalizing away when really horrible things happen, like what happened on October 7th. Like, he has this tendency to be hyper specific when his opponents say something or about his opponents' misgivings and in some cases atrocities. But then we'll generalize away anything that, whether it's the Palestinians do or Hamas does. He said Hamas is 1,000 times better than the fascist settler colonial apartheid state. And the real harm happening here is that another illegal stolen land sale is taking place at another synagogue. So he does this, right? So he'll, and Hamas, I did an explainer about this years ago, is a messianic death cult that every step of the way in the organization's existence had founding documents and explicit pronouncements that they weren't just about the sovereignty of the Palestinian people and the dignity of the Palestinian people, which obviously is a really important cause, but they were about annihilating all Jews, annihilating all of Israel, in some cases wider gains. And, it's not just Israel who are the victims of Hamas. I've talked to and interviewed a lot of people in Gaza themselves, whether they're secular Palestinians or other devout Palestinians, who just don't agree with the draconian, authoritarian, totalitarian, Islamo-fascist vision of Hamas. And here we have in Hassan Piker, somebody who excuses that and gets mad when people point out Hamas's atrocities, and again, has said things like, we deserve 9/11. And he's apologized for that, but this is a pattern of behavior. And that wasn't something he said when he was 14 years old. It wasn't something he said when he was 17 years old. That was something he said in 2019. And it was followed by equally incendiary comments. And so now this is bubbling up. People are saying, well, is this a guy who deserves comfort in the left? And my opinion is, how are we to take comments from people like Tucker Carlson or people like Nick Fuentes or pick any quack on the right and point to the anti-Semitism, the bigotry or whatever, and say that's not good company to keep. But yet people in the Democratic coalition are spending time with this guy and excusing his rhetoric. And it goes all the way to the tops of the mainstream media. I know when people talk about the mainstream media, they talk about MSNBC or they talk about CNN, and he did just appear on CNN. But the mainstream media also includes companies like Crooked Media, who I've partnered with before. I've been friends with those guys at various points. But they've had Hassan Piker on like 3 or 4 times since these comments. They treat him like a good standing member of the coalition. They don't really push him on his views. When they do so, they do it mildly, and they do it in a way that would in no way be congruent with how they would treat somebody on the right who said the exact same things. And as all of this stuff is going on, at least as of this recording, when reporters have reached out to Crooked and asked them to explain their relationship with Piker, they could defend it, but they don't even pick up the phone. They're not going on the record to even explain the relationship with Piker. So they just hope that their audience doesn't notice. So this is where we are today, right? Look, we spend most of our time on this podcast talking about the problems on the right, but those critiques only make sense if we ourselves are challenging people within our own coalition to reject the very views that we criticize on the right. Like, it's not okay to invite people on your program who say the U.S. deserved 9/11, who imply or explicitly state that the people of Israel deserved October 7th, right? Minimize it at the very least, right? If they didn't even go that far, right? That to me is somebody who should be challenged, who shouldn't be welcomed within the coalition. And I don't think that you should be playing this game of courting one particular online segment of the left and doing so by not challenging them and saying, we're going to cozy up to you. Like, I don't even think that this is from Crooked's perspective is from sincerely held beliefs. I think that they saw, hey, we'll be irrelevant if we don't court this this part of the online left. We don't want to really criticize them because we don't want them to come after us. They probably have staff members who share the views of Hassan Piker and are fans of his work. They probably don't want an insurrection from their own unionized staff on this issue. And so they have full audience capture now. And I say this as somebody who had worked with these guys, and have respected them on other issues. But I think what we have now are a bunch of people who are less concerned about the truth, are less concerned about winning elections and appealing to reasonable people in this country, and are more concerned about building an audience at all costs, not offending the wrong people on the sort of super online left, getting those clicks, monetizing, winning that online game. And I think that's a dangerous game and one they're going to come to regret. Like, I remember how despondent they were and everybody else was after Trump won the second term, and how it was all about, okay, we need to be more truthful. We need to be tougher about having the conversations that need to be had on the left, right? What are the conversations we've been ducking? Where haven't we been honest when we should be? Well, here we are, not too long after, a little bit over a year later, and we're seeing even less courage than we did before that election. And I think that's a problem. It needs to be called out. And if they want to explain themselves, if they want to engage in some kind of public dialogue and justify this, I'm happy to hear an explanation. But it seems like right now they're trying to hide from this conversation. They don't even want to justify it. So that's that. Let's talk about a couple of other trends before I send you out. Trump has the lowest approval for any president at this point in history. Here's Harry Enton talking about this.
Costs. Take a look here. Take a look at Donald Trump's overall net approval rating. This is the lowest of his term, the lowest of his second term. We're talking about minus 17 points, 17 points underwater. And unlike in Donald Trump's first term, in which he was negative basically throughout his entire term, Trump actually started off in positive territory here in his second term. But now he's at the lowest point of his second term. But there's an even bigger comparison to be made, okay? So obviously Trump was elected once back in 2016, then he took a 4-year break, and then, of course, he's serving his second term, and it's his second presidency. So I went back and I looked at all of the presidents at this point in a presidency, all of them at this point in a presidency, and guess what? Donald Trump is the lowest ever at this point in a presidency, lower than Joe Biden, lower than Jimmy Carter, lower than Ronald Reagan. He's lower than all of them at this point in a presidency. You can make any sort of swimming comparison you want. Maybe you want to make a comparison with a diver like Greg Louganis. Maybe you want to make a swimming comparison, Michael Phelps. Maybe if you're me, like an old Jewish soul, you want to make a comparison with Mark Spitz. Either way, he is very much.
So Trump is in trouble. His coalition is in trouble. Trump's not running for re-election, but obviously this is not good for the midterms for Trump. And obviously is really bad news for J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, or whoever the standard bearer will be in a couple of years. Like, obviously a lot can happen. We also got some news that Democratic Party ID is the highest it has been since Gallup started tracking it in Q1 2015. The GOP had never been below 40 before, but now they're at 39. Dems are at 49, so they're at a plus 10. And so these are generally good signs. And obviously, nobody should be complacent. It's going to take a lot of work for Democrats to both win back the House and potentially the Senate in the midterm elections. There's a lot going on here. Trump is trying to nationalize certain aspects of the election. He issued an executive order, which is all but certain to be illegal, but is going to be something we have to fight. He just issued that. He's still trying to pass legislation in the House and Senate to curtail the voting power. We can be assured that he's going to sic the Department of Justice and the FBI on polling locations and election officials and intimidate people, maybe even ICE activity. There's going to be tons of money pouring in. Trump is sitting on about $1 trillion, but they're facing significant headwinds right now. This is not a good election cycle for them. And so, generally speaking, with everything going on in this war, with all the cracks in the MAGA coalition, with the polling numbers, Democratic ID going on, this is a fairly favorable environment for Democrats to perform really well heading into this midterms and probably beyond. And so that is a dose of optimism for you as I leave you. Again, if you haven't yet, take a look at the show description and vote for us for the Webby Awards. Really important piece of journalism. On my Substack, you can go to realravigupta.substack.com. I talk about this week the Manosphere documentary on Netflix and how scary it was and what the implications of that documentary are for all of us who care about politics and about our future, our kids. So you could check that out at realravigupta.substack.com. And with that, that's all I have today. I'll be back with Jason next week. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.